I got some really good feedback on a couple of the flip throughs that I've done. I did one on the One Ring. I did one on the Dungeon Dressing by Raging Swan, which is a great resource. On Facebook, there was a conversation that I saw recently with people discussing different types of games and what was worth getting, what wasn't. And Savage Worlds was mentioned. And the various settings for Savage Worlds were mentioned, and somebody made a comment, I can't remember who it was, saying that they were slightly surprised to see how expensive the settings were, and they thought that was a bit of a rip-off. And I understand why they said that. I thought their reasons made sense. However, I actually think they're wrong. I thought a quick flip through of 2 books would help illustrate my point. First book I want to have a very, very brief look at is the Savage Worlds rulebook. It's the Deluxe Explorers Edition. It is, as you can see, quite a small book. You know, it's not one of your huge hardbacks, and this is one of the reasons why it's cheap. But I also loved it. I bought copies of this for just about all of my gaming group for Christmas because I want to run a bit of Savage Worlds. For £8, I can't remember what it is in dollars for those of you in the States, but for a small amount of money, for a tiny amount of money, I can give people a whole rule system. And one of the guys that I gave this to is now running games himself using it and absolutely loving it in a homebrewed world. Okay, so yeah, you get the rules, character design, skills. I'm not going to talk too much about the actual Savage Worlds rules because there's people in there that people have written about that are far more knowledgeable than I am. The book's nicely laid out. It's fairly easy to find your way round. Yeah, I don't know what that was marking, but it was something that I wanted to look up and come back to. So yeah, it's a really nice little book. The system I really like. It's got a lot of love from a whole stack of people. So like I say, I just thought I'd do a quick flip through. But what you will see with this is all of the pictures are from very different genres. So you can run horror in it, you can run Victorian fiction, you can run up to date, you can run fantasy. You can run whatever you want, really. And I really like that. I've got some quite good ideas for games that I'd like to run, which otherwise I would never be able to. So, yeah, there's quite a nice little section on game mastering, how to get players into it, a small bestiary, but infinitely reskinnable for various different things. And then there are some adventures that you can run. These are and this is key to understanding. I think one of the things about Savage Worlds is, you know, the Blood in the Snow adventure. Again, it's a small page, and that's it. 3 sides. That's your entire adventure, and that's something that's going to take you a session to run. It's not something that's kind of, okay, yeah, then I'll need to stitch 3 or 4 encounters together. This isn't an encounter, it's an entire adventure. There's a space one if you want one. And, you know, that's, again, an entire adventure, runs you through the whole thing, finishes there. One of the things about Savage Worlds is you can write up an adventure in a very, very small amount of space. Now, as I mentioned, the discussion that I saw online was talking about the settings books, and you know, this book cost me £8 The settings book cost me £28, I think. So you know, it's considerably more. And I think that was the point that the person was making, is that's a lot more money than the whole rule book. Somebody's ripping me off. Okay, I'm going to put in what I got to run with it is Space 1889. And I was really unsure, because I'm a fan of Ubiquity as well, whether to go with Space 1889 in Savage Worlds or whether to go for Space 1889 in Ubiquity. At the end of the day, the thing that decided me was that the Ubiquity version wasn't out, and I knew I could pick this up at my local game shop, so I did. Now this is, as you can see, a full-size hardback book. It's not the thickest hardback book known to man, but neither is it the tiniest. There is a lot of stuff in here, and you know, there's maps of the planets and various stuff. It's a, for those of you who don't know, it's a Victorian space opera type game. If you think John Carter of Mars, if you think the Barsoom books, you're not a million miles away. Frank Frey does a really good write-up on the Ubiquity version, or really good video on the Ubiquity version, and talks about the background more than I'm going to here. However, what you get is some general background, stuff on extra edges, character concepts that will fit with the things, and these are really nice little character concepts as well. A whole stack of different things to say, you know, these are things that tie into possible campaigns that you can run. It just gives you ways through doing it. Background edges, possessions, because obviously, you know, there's going to be some specialist stuff in 1889 when you're looking at space travel and various stuff like that. So this is all really good stuff, and it is, again, it's nice thick high GSM paper. It's a really good book to flip through and look at. Stuff on various different possessions. There's specific setting rules for kind of weird science stuff. It's just it's a great thing. Again, more settings rules. This to me is where the book starts to get interesting, though. The many worlds. It describes, you know, the asteroid belt, Earth generally, but then Earth in detail. So if you want to, if your guys decide they want to spend time in Africa, there's stuff about Africa, there's stuff about Antarctica, Asia, India. But the other thing that's interesting within this is that some of these areas have little symbols here. So if your guys are in the Ottoman Empire and you think, okay, what am I going to do with them? There's an adventure called Turkish Delight on page 163. Again, remember what I said about the core book? Each adventure, very small amount of space, it is a full adventure, and they're designed not to take a lot of organisation. They're designed not to take a lot of writing. You know, so in this case, when Professor Bottoms is poisoned, the heroes race to Turkey for the cure, which is buried in Xerxes' legendary tomb. But there is a full adventure on page 163 that does that. This makes it really good. You can just say, well, all right, on your way to such and such, you pass through, but the interesting thing for me is that if you are going to have people in particular places, we're now on the Mars pages, I think. If you're going to have people in a particular place, you can tie several adventures together. So you can make it a lot more sandboxy, or you can tie it down a particular other way if you want to. The next section, Adventures, actually is an adventure generator. And it's really quite usable. You know, you can randomly decide, okay, do you want to do investigation? Do you want to do exploration, procurement, social, or Victorian pulp? And for each of those, there are ways of pulling things in. And I'm not going to go through this in detail now, but I've had a quick look through it, and they're brilliant. They're really usable. Very quickly, if somebody said, okay, do you want to play tomorrow night? I could come to this, roll some dice, read through some ideas, and come up with something unique, depending on where my characters were, depends on what it would do, and it wouldn't be a big difficult thing to manage. Again, a really nice little section. It's not just a random dungeon generator. It's really going to help you to come up with ideas and explore a particular area. Again, another section, and this is why the settings books are so usable for me, or I like them so much, is this whole section is a complete campaign. in 13 parts. You might be able to do one of these a week. You certainly wouldn't do more than one of these a week. Some of these might take you more than a week to do. But it sits in, it's a complete campaign, but there is open space between these so that if you want to spend more than 13 weeks or the characters want to go off and explore and do other things, as I said before, you look at the area they are and then you've got the adventures further on. But this takes a way through. It ties up with the character concepts earlier on in the book. So although your players can build any characters that they want, and they can be really varied, they'll all kind of tie into the campaign that's in here. And it's a nice little section. Again, I come back to, if you take this Lost Temple one, you are looking at 2 pages, 3 pages, and that's all the reading you're going to have to do. The prep is really light, very easy to run, very quick to run, but will give you a really, really good evening's entertainment with your players. And at the end of 13 sessions or so, maybe more, like say, if it takes your players longer to complete each one than a single week, you're going to get to the end having had and experienced a really good story arc. I'm now going to jump forwards a little bit. So the rest of the book, and there's quite a lot of it again, these are the individual adventures which were mentioned earlier on. One of the beauties again of having so many of these is you can take individual ones and reskin them. They're all set in places, so you can explore them from that point of view, or you can decide to drop them into places. I'm coming back to, these are short. And I use pre-generated adventures for Pathfinder. I use pre-generated adventures for quite a lot of my games. These are really, really easy to use. And they give you a lot of stuff. Even not being very confident about running games, I could pick this up and I'd be confident I could run one of these games with, an hour, 2 hours prep, and really enjoy it. But because they're so small on the page, you're getting an awful lot of bang for your buck. And I think that's my key point. The whole of the rest of this book is just full with more adventures and ideas than you could use in this setting if you played for 10 years once a week, and really went to town with it. It's just great. And then you've got random adventure generators on top of that. At the end you've then also got allies and enemies, NPCs, monsters, etc., etc. So I think that's my point, is although that cost me £28 and that only cost me £8, that gives me everything I need to get going, everything I need to run games. I ran an Aliens game in it. I'm thinking I might run a Prince of Persia Sands of Time game in it. I know somebody's running a homebrew system in it. It is everything you need just in that book to run a whole stack of games. Having spent £30 on this though, I am in no way concerned about doing it. I think that was amazing value. Certainly some of my players are saying, when are we actually going to get to play this? And it depends on how quickly we find a natural break in the games we're already playing. But again, I could play from that one book for years on end without running out of ideas. And if somebody said, well, hey, we're on Earth, I want to go and look at Egypt this week, there's probably 2-3 things in there I could do, or I could roll up something random, or I could reskin something from another area. I genuinely think if you're looking at Savage Worlds, buy yourself the Deluxe Explorers Edition of the rulebook. It's so little money and the game system is so good, it's definitely worth doing. If you're interested in a particular game, go buy yourself the setting book. Like I say, since doing this, I had a look at the PDF for the Ubiquity version of Space 1889, and the thing that made me convinced that I did the right thing when I bought this was that there is no campaign system, or at least I couldn't see it in the PDF, and yet that's what makes this such a brilliant resource. And as much as I like Ubiquity, And to be honest, as tempted as I am to buy the Space 1889 for Ubiquity as well, I love this, and I can see me playing this again and again and again and again, and it was well worth the money. Yeah, hopefully I haven't rambled on too much.